As a leader, you might think building your annual budget is something that you should just do, that you should own for your team. And I will ask you to resist that urge. Ensure that each leader has accountability to the project or budget line that they own. If they're responsible for that project, they should be responsible for the budget. This is going to be a really great way to model transparency to the team, empower them, teach them about the process, and hold them accountable for forecasting when expenses hit across the calendar year. If you're new in your company or in your role, use this time to ask as many questions as possible and do so with your team there. This is not one of those times to assume something. If you have a question, most likely someone else does too, so ask it. Welcome to You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. You are ambitious in life and in your career, but something is missing. You want to bring more of your passion to what you do. Because let's be honest, you pour a ton into your work, and it needs to mean more. I'm your host, Laura Eigel. I'm a mom, wife, PhD, coach, advocate, introvert, and indoor rowing fanatic. I'm passionate about living a life that's in line with my values. We'll give you the actionable tips and tools you need to lead with your values, make a difference, and have career success. The world needs more diversity and authenticity in the top jobs at organizations. Your leadership belongs there. You belong in the C-Suite. What gets you up in the morning? What drives your decisions? What do you stand for? No idea, not even sure where to start? I use my values to guide my life and career. It's the basis of how I've built boundaries for myself and stuck to them. Are you ready to dig into what matters to you? Go to thecatchgroup.com to download your free values worksheet. That's thecatchgroup.com to download your free values worksheet to get to your core values and take action on what matters most. Welcome to the You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. A few episodes ago, I talked about your leadership annual operating plan. I talked through the importance of bringing your team through the strategic planning process and the annual operating plan. I hope you are able to do that, or you might still be in the middle of it. The next step in your annual planning might be budgeting. Who loves this part of the year when they have to submit their budget? Not many people. This is one of those things that I used to dread as a leader until I realized that it was a strategic task. It had always felt very transactional and something that I had to do, knowing that it would most likely change as the business needs change throughout the year. But the budget planning process is actually very strategic. Today, we're going to talk about how to make this process a strategic action for you and your team for their development. We'll talk about understanding your annual budget process. Next, we'll talk about empowering your team to own their piece of the budget. And we'll also talk about how to utilize the budget process to ensure you budget for development within the budget that you submit. Let's get started. First, you need to understand your budgeting process. In episode 9, Who Are Your MVPs, Your Most Valuable Partnerships, I highlighted your finance partner as one of your MVPs. Listen to that episode to get more advice on how to build strategic relationships with those relationships that were highlighted. Your finance partner is an important relationship, especially to set you up for success in the annual budgeting process. This process is different depending on where you work, but in general, after you set up your annual operating plan, then you budget according to those priorities. You will most likely have a template to submit your budget in Excel or Smartsheets or some other budget planning tool. And it may have your previous year in it to show what you projected, what you actually spent, and the gaps. If you've built a great relationship with your finance partner, they'll walk you through your budget and answer all of your questions. They want the budget that you submit to be as accurate as possible and are usually willing to help you get it right up front. Next, you want to use the budgeting process as a learning experience for your team. You want to empower them. You do not, I repeat, you do not need to be the person to be doing this whole thing. As a leader, you might think building your annual budget is something that you should just do, that you should own for your team. And I will ask you to resist that urge. Ensure that each leader has accountability to the project or budget line that they own. If they're responsible for that project, they should be responsible for the budget. This is going to be a really great way to model transparency to the team, empower them, teach them about the process, and hold them accountable for forecasting when expenses hit across the calendar year. If you're new in your company or in your role, use this time to ask as many questions as possible and do so with your team there. This is not one of those times to assume something. If you have a question, most likely someone else does too, so ask it. As a team, ensure that your budget owners and your finance partner are all there. Here are a couple of questions you might ask your finance partner. Am I presenting this budget to leadership? How does the budget get finalized and locked in? How will the overall budget across other departments be shared later for visibility? Where do budget owners have the autonomy to move money around? Only in the same project line item or in the same category? When do we need finance or leadership approval to make changes to the budget? How and when do we forecast spending for each quarter? Then set up monthly meetings with all leaders that are budget owners in your team with your finance partner. You'll learn from each other and hold each other accountable to forecast and invoice and really just plan better. Use the annual budgeting process as a way to increase your team's financial acumen, to empower them, and to delegate. Last, as a leader, I want you to figure out how you are going to plan for the investment of your team, of their development within your budget. There are some budget lines that you might need to put in that you don't already have. For instance, a line item for recognition. How are you going to recognize your people? You will need to invest in that. Are you going to spend money on gift cards, formal recognition gifts, experiences together, either virtually or in person? Are you finally going to come together for the first time for a team offsite and you're planning something fun for the team to do together? How will you recognize the team? You're most likely going to need money to do that. Another example of a budget line I want you to make sure that you have is a team development line item. This is different than team recognition. How will you develop together? What do you need to collectively grow? A skill, a class, a book? Not everyone likes to learn the same way, so this may be something to brainstorm with your team. However, you should put budget to it. Make sure that it's a line item in your budget. The next line item that I want you to add, individual development. How are you investing in each person's development in your team? Again, this will most likely take some investment, sometimes time, but most likely also money. Some companies have an annual allowance per person for development. Some may have guidelines by level of employees or how much money you can spend. Whatever the formula, allocate an amount of money per person or allocate based on their individual development plans. Is it money for group coaching, leadership coaching, an online course or certification, or a conference for each person to attend? I've seen companies that don't offer development to all employees, like administrative professionals. And I think that's really unfortunate. You really need to be developing everyone on your team, regardless of title. Create that learning culture. So you need to assign a line item to all of it. And I get it. Your budget may not be that big, but guess what? You probably aren't doing either. You're probably not traveling a ton. You're probably not buying a ton of impromptu team lunches and other things. So instead, spend that money on development and plan for it. Another line item that I don't want you to miss is a line item for your own personal development. One of the best things that you can do for your team is to continue to develop yourself. How are you budgeting for your own development? Is it an investment in a coach, a development program for yourself? That might be the best gift that you ever give your team, developing you, because you'll show up better for them. Whose budget does your development go in? Your own? Then plan for it. If it's your manager's budget, then ensure that they've put a line item to it. Another line item that I want you to include is for diversity, equity, and inclusion. You may not own this holistically. This might be owned by the chief diversity officer at your company or your HR department, but what are you doing to further the diversity, equity, and inclusion for your own team? Is it specific development for different employees? Is it team development to further your anti-racism journey as a team together? Whatever it is, put a line item to it. Put it in your budget. If something doesn't have a line item in the budget, then what you're saying is it's probably not going to get prioritized. So make a line item in your budget for all of those important tasks. Today, we've outlined why the budget process is strategic, not transactional. It's about building the partnership with your finance partner and building that relationship. It's also about building the capability of budget owners in your team and empowering them. It's about budgeting to ensure recognition, team development, and individual development activities are prioritized. I know it can seem just like another spreadsheet that you have to fill out, but use it as an opportunity to prioritize what's important for your team. Remember, your leadership belongs here. You belong in the C-suite. That wraps up today's episode. Thank you. I want to thank you so much for listening to the You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. If you are enjoying this content, please remember to rate and review on Apple Podcasts. By leaving a review, you are helping others find this content. We will be featuring 5-star reviews on air in upcoming episodes. Editing and support for the podcast is done by S&E Podcast Management. To get more tips and tools to help you live a life guided by your values, go to thecatchgroup.com. Keep your boundaries and take care.